My parents had gone on a weekend retreat, and I was left behind in the old Victorian house that had been in our family for generations. Night had fallen, casting the rooms into shadows that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. The glow of the fireplace flickered, casting dancing silhouettes on the walls. Despite the comforting warmth, a chill ran down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I turned on all the lights, seeking refuge in their artificial glow. The house, once a place of familiarity and comfort, now felt alien and eerie. The portraits of distant ancestors that lined the walls seemed to peer at me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. With an unsettled heart, I retreated to the living room and turned on the television, hoping that the noise and distraction would quell my unease. Hours passed, but my sense of isolation only deepened. The television's bluish glow illuminated the room, its sound a mere hum against the backdrop of an unnerving silence. The house creaked and settled, its symphony of sounds a haunting reminder of the history it held. A sudden knock at the door shattered the stillness, and my heart leaped to my throat. I stared at the door, frozen in place. Who could be visiting at this hour? My parents had left strict instructions not to open the door for anyone, but the knocking persisted, growing more insistent with each passing second. With hesitant steps, I approached the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. The knocker remained hidden in the shadows, their identity concealed. A voice, faint and distant, reached my ears, an urgent plea for help that sent a shock of empathy through me. My heart battled reason as I cracked the door open, allowing a sliver of light to spill into the night. A figure stood before me, their features obscured by the darkness. They were drenched, raindrops glistening on their hair and clothes. They pleaded for refuge from the storm that raged outside, their words a desperate plea for sanctuary. Against my better judgment, I opened the door wider and allowed the stranger to enter. The scent of rain hung heavy in the air as they stepped across the threshold, their eyes locking onto mine. Their gratitude was palpable, and a sense of camaraderie formed between us, a bond forged by the darkness outside and the shared need for companionship. We settled in the living room, the fire crackling as we exchanged stories. Their words painted a picture of a wanderer, someone who had ventured far from home and found themselves caught in the storm's fury. As they spoke, I found myself captivated by their tales of adventure and hardship, a mutual understanding forming between us. But as the conversation continued, a sense of unease crept back into my consciousness. The details of their stories began to shift, inconsistencies revealing themselves beneath the surface. Their gaze held a strange intensity, and a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. I realized too late that I had allowed a stranger into my home, one whose intentions were veiled in mystery. The room grew colder, the fire's warmth unable to penetrate the growing tension. Their words took on a sinister quality, and I felt a rising panic as I realized that I was alone in the house with a stranger whose true nature remained concealed. My heart raced as I contemplated my options, escape or confrontation. With a surge of adrenaline, I rose from my seat and backed away from the stranger. Their expression twisted into a malevolent grin, their facade crumbling to reveal something darker beneath. Panic and dread intertwined as I realized the danger I had unknowingly invited into my home. As the truth became undeniable, I bolted toward the front door, the stranger's laughter echoing in my ears. The hallway stretched before me, its shadows seeming to reach out for me with menacing intent. The house that had once been a haven now felt like a prison, each step fueled by a desperate need for escape. I burst through the front door and into the night, rain drenching my clothes as I sprinted through the darkness. Behind me, I could hear the pursuing footsteps of the stranger, their laughter a haunting backdrop to my flight. Adrenaline carried me forward, my heart pounding in rhythm with my desperate breaths. The night seemed endless, my gasps for air the only sounds that cut through the pounding rain. With every step, I could feel the stranger's presence, their malevolent intent a tangible force that drove me onward. It was a race against time, a fight for survival in the face of an enemy I could barely comprehend. I stumbled through the rain-soaked streets, my lungs burning with exertion. Lights from distant houses offered a flickering hope, but the shadows seemed to stretch and distort, playing tricks on my senses. The rain fell like a curtain, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. Finally, I reached a house bathed in warm light, its front door flung open in welcome. I stumbled across the threshold, collapsing into the arms of a concerned stranger who had witnessed my frantic flight. As I gasped for breath, I recounted the chilling encounter that had led me to their doorstep. My parents had left for a weekend getaway, leaving me with the rustic charm of this retreat. I relished the idea of a peaceful escape, a chance to disconnect from the chaos of the city. But as darkness settled in, a feeling of unease wormed its way into my thoughts. I busied myself with preparations for the evening. The soft flicker of candles cast dancing shadows across the walls, creating an ambience that was simultaneously soothing and disconcerting. The familiar creaks and groans of the old cabin were more pronounced in the stillness, the echoes of past generations seemingly reaching out to me. With a sigh, I settled onto the couch, my fingers dancing across the keys of my laptop. The rhythmic tapping provided a comforting rhythm, a constant in the midst of the unsettling silence. I immersed myself in work, the glow of the screen a lifeline in the encroaching darkness. Hours passed, and the cabin felt like a cocoon, protecting me from the mysteries that lurked outside. But as I closed my laptop, a faint sound cut through the air, a soft whisper, barely audible over the crackling of the fireplace. I strained my ears, dismissing it as a trick of the wind or my imagination. I glanced at the clock, realizing that it was well past midnight. The cabin seemed to exhale a sigh of its own, its wooden walls expanding and contracting with the changing temperature. But amidst the symphony of sounds, I heard it again, the whisper now accompanied by a subtle rustling. My heart raced as I scanned the room, my gaze fixated on the window. Shadows danced on the glass, the trees outside swaying in the breeze. With a gulp, I rose from the couch and approached the window, peering into the darkness. Nothing seemed amiss, but the whisper lingered in the air like an unanswered question. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, and I drew the curtains shut, shutting out the world outside. The cabin felt like a sanctuary once more, its walls offering protection from whatever lurked beyond. But the unease continued to gnaw at me, an itch I couldn't scratch. I climbed into bed, seeking solace in the familiarity of my room. The rhythmic lapping of water against the shore provided a soothing lullaby, and my eyes grew heavy. Just as I was about to surrender to sleep, a soft tap on the window shattered the silence. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the window, my mind racing through rational explanations. A branch, perhaps, or an animal seeking refuge from the night. But the tapping continued, each rhythmic sound a message that defied logic. With trembling hands, I approached the window once more, cautiously drawing back the curtain. A figure stood on the other side of the glass, their face obscured by shadows. Panic surged within me, and I stumbled back, my breaths coming in quick gasps. The figure's presence was at once mesmerizing and terrifying, their gaze fixed on me as if they could see through the glass and into my soul. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering in my chest. The figure remained outside, unmoving, their presence a haunting enigma. As I huddled in my bed, I questioned my sanity, wondering if exhaustion had conjured the apparition before me. Time seemed to stretch as I lay there, my eyes fixed on the window. Gradually, the figure faded into the darkness, their form melding with the shadows. Relief and trepidation warred within me, leaving me uncertain of what I had truly witnessed. Morning brought with it a hesitant calm. The sun's rays illuminated the cabin, dispelling the shadows that had danced so ominously the night before. I ventured outside, my footsteps echoing on the wooden porch. I stared at the window, the glass a barrier that separated me from the mysteries of the night. With a deep breath, I turned my gaze to the lake, its tranquil surface reflecting the promise of a new day. The events of the previous night lingered in my mind, a puzzle with pieces that refused to fit together. Whether it was a trick of the imagination or something more, the cabin held secrets that transcended the boundaries of reality. As I gazed out at the vast expanse of water, a whisper of wind caressed my cheek, carrying with it the echoes of the night. And amidst the rustling leaves and lapping waves, I could almost hear the faintest hint of a reply, a whisper from the depths of the unknown. I stood at the window of my family's remote cabin, gazing out at the surrounding woods that stretched into darkness. My parents had left for the weekend, entrusting me with the solitude of this rustic haven. As the hours passed, a sense of isolation settled in, magnified by the eerie stillness of the night. The cabin creaked and settled, its walls and floors speaking their own language. I tried to shake off the unease, reminding myself that it was just the sounds of a weathered old building. The cabin's fireplace crackled, its warmth providing a comforting embrace against the chill that seeped through the windows. I huddled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, attempting to distract myself with a book. But the words on the page seemed to blur together, my mind preoccupied with the shadowy world outside. With a sigh, I put the book down and reached for the television remote. The screen flickered to life, casting a pale light across the room. The familiar faces of news anchors brought a sense of normalcy, anchoring me to reality. But the news stories themselves were far from comforting. Reports of mysterious disappearances and unexplained phenomena filled the airwaves. As I watched, a movement caught my eye, a faint glimmer of light outside the window. My heart quickened as I turned my gaze toward the source, my eyes widening in disbelief. A figure stood among the trees, their form obscured by the darkness. The soft glow seemed to emanate from them, casting an otherworldly aura. Fear knotted in my chest, and I tried to dismiss the figure as a trick of the light or my overactive imagination. But their presence lingered, a beacon in the night that drew my attention like a moth to a flame. With a shiver, I realized they were watching the cabin, their gaze fixed on me. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed the local authorities. My voice quavered as I explained the situation, my words punctuated by my racing heartbeat. The dispatcher assured me that they would send an officer to investigate, but the ETA was uncertain given the remote location. With the phone still in hand, I glanced back at the window. The figure remained, undeterred by my actions. The minutes stretched on, each tick of the clock a reminder of the impending unknown. I contemplated closing the blinds, shutting out the enigmatic gaze that seemed to pierce through the glass. A soft knock at the door shattered the silence, and my heart leaped to my throat. My pulse raced as I approached the door, my unease growing with every step. Through the peephole, I saw the silhouette of a uniformed officer, their presence a reassuring beacon in the night. I opened the door, my breath catching in my throat as the officer stepped inside. Their features were cast in shadows, their expression unreadable. I recounted the events, my voice shaky as I described the figure outside the window. The officer listened intently, their eyes never leaving my face. As I finished speaking, the officer's gaze shifted toward the window, their body tensing. They turned back to me, their tone urgent as they instructed me to stay inside while they investigated. With a nod, I watched them disappear into the night, their flashlight's beam piercing the darkness. Minutes turned into an agonizing hour as I paced the cabin, my mind consumed by worry. The officer's silhouette finally reappeared at the window, their form backlit by the moon's glow. Relief washed over me as I rushed to open the door, eager for answers. But as the door swung open, a bone-chilling gust of wind swept through the cabin, extinguishing the fireplace's flames. The officer's face was hidden in the shadows, their voice an eerie whisper as they spoke. They claimed that no one was outside, no footprints in the snow, no signs of intrusion. Dread clawed at my insides as I realized that the figure I had seen was nowhere to be found. I thanked the officer mechanically, their presence offering little comfort in the face of the inexplicable. They left, their form disappearing into the night. Alone once again, I locked the door and retreated to my room, the moon casting a silver glow through the window. Sleep remained elusive as I lay in bed, my thoughts consumed by the figure in the woods. Had it been a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination? Or was there something beyond explanation that had watched me from the shadows? The night stretched on, its weight pressing down on me. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, I finally allowed myself to close my eyes, exhaustion pulling me into a restless slumber. But the figure's enigmatic gaze lingered, a haunting reminder that even in the sanctuary of home, there are mysteries that elude understanding. I stood at the threshold of our cozy suburban home, the warm glow of the porch light spilling out onto the front yard. My parents were away for the weekend, leaving me to navigate the solitude of a home usually filled with laughter and life. As darkness wrapped its tendrils around the world outside, an unfamiliar sense of unease settled within me. Entering the house, I flicked on lights, banishing the encroaching shadows to the corners. The familiar creaks and settling sounds of the house greeted me like old friends offering reassurance. But tonight, those sounds seemed to hold a different meaning, an unsettling reminder that I was truly alone. Seeking distraction, I decided to indulge in a movie marathon. The bright glow of the television provided a reassuring companion as I lost myself in cinematic worlds. Yet, as each movie concluded, the inevitable silence that followed felt deafening. The hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of crickets became my symphony, punctuating the quietude that seemed to thicken with every passing moment. With a determined effort, I shrugged off the unease and headed to the kitchen to prepare a late-night snack. The refrigerator's light spilled over the counters as I assembled my ingredients, and the comforting aroma of warm food filled the air. As I settled into the cozy embrace of my meal, I finally began to feel a semblance of normalcy. But then a faint scratching sound echoed from somewhere nearby. My eyes darted around the kitchen, searching for the source of the disturbance. My heart pounded as I traced the sound to the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. Through the dim light, I could make out the faint silhouette of a figure that shouldn't have been there. Fear wrapped its icy fingers around my heart as I watched the figure's shadowy form move closer to the glass. Panic surged through me, urging me to flee to the safety of my room. I backed away, my eyes fixed on the glass door as the figure continued to approach. The rational part of my mind tried to reason that it was likely a neighbor or perhaps an animal, but an instinctual terror refused to be ignored. With a trembling hand, I reached for my phone and dialed my neighbor's number. The ringing seemed to stretch on forever, each second amplifying my anxiety. Finally, a voice answered on the other end, and I spilled out my fear-laden words, explaining the figure outside the glass. My neighbor's voice was reassuring as she assured me that she would be right over. Clutching my phone like a lifeline, I watched as the figure's movements grew more frantic. The scratching intensified, and I could see its hands pressed against the glass, fingers curling and uncurling. Just as I was about to lose all semblance of composure, the sound of footsteps on the front porch sent a wave of relief coursing through me. My neighbor, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, appeared at the glass door. With a stern expression, she ordered the figure to reveal themselves. The figure turned, and my breath caught in my throat as its face was illuminated by the porch light. It was a face I recognized, a face that belonged to a troubled individual from the neighborhood, someone I had seen but never interacted with. His eyes held a vacant look, a look that sent shivers down my spine. My neighbor, with a firm tone, instructed him to leave the premises immediately. His gaze lingered for a moment before he turned and stumbled away, disappearing into the night. I watched until he was out of sight, the weight of his presence still lingering in the air. As my neighbor assured me that everything was under control, a mixture of gratitude and lingering fear coursed through me. The ordeal had lasted only a few minutes, but its impact was profound. Alone in the quiet house once more, I locked doors and windows, creating a fortress against the outside world. The night wore on, the darkness outside eventually giving way to the soft light of dawn. Exhausted but awake, I found solace in the return of daylight. The events of the night had left an indelible mark, a reminder that even within the safety of our own homes, we are not always as alone as we believe.